أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء ربنا واجعلني مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, this week we decided switching gears a little bit. We have been studying 25th word for quite some time about eloquence of Quran. There were the addendum to that part, but since it was containing a big summary of what we have discussed so far, we thought maybe it's better to give a break for that topic and study 26th word. Inshallah, we can go back to the addendum in the future. But for now, let's study the 26th word, which is about divine determining, qadar. So this is an interesting topic overall. Before starting the topic, would you like to share anything that you have or your reserves about the topic? If anybody has anything to say before we start, I would be happy to hear. If not, we can directly jump into the topic as well. Okay. So belief in Qadar is one of the 6 pillars of belief. So it's an important topic, yet maybe a little bit counterintuitive. So we have all sorts of questions, I believe, about the matter. And it's not going to be an easy study, so it requires some focus. Inshallah, may Allah help us with this topic, increase our understanding and increase us in Iman. Ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The 26th word, the treatise on divine determining. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدَرٍ مَّعْلُومٍ. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. And there is not a thing, but its sources and treasures inexhaustible are with us. But we only send down thereof in due and ascertainable measures. This is chapter 15, verse number 21. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And of all things have we taken account in a clear book. And this from chapter 36, Surah Yasin, verse number 12. So in these verses, the word qadar is in the first verse, as it says, وَإِن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدَرٍ مَّعْلُومٍ. But as you see, the word qadar is here translated as ascertainable measures, qadar ma'lum, so a measure that is known. So it looks like the thing qadar has something to do with measures, taking measures or measuring things. And then the other word, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And of all things have we taken account in a clear book, as if something things are already, actually, everything is already written in a sense. These are the verses that point to that. Now, Quran being the book of guidance, and I'm expected to bear witness to the truths of Quran. So how am I going to be able to bear witness to these, if you like, claims? Divine determining and the power of choice. So the word divine determining here refers to qadr, and the power of choice is the free will, are two important matters. We shall attempt to disclose a few of their mysteries in 4 topics. Okay. So 2 important topics. One is qadr, the other one is juz'i ikhtiyari in the original language, like free will. The Arabic term that's used here is like a choice, but if you like, tiny choice, juz'i ikhtiyari. So these are the 2 topics that we are going to, inshallah, investigate. Okay.
Oh, may I ask a question before we start? So this, the word free in free will, what is the reference to that? Like, what is the source of it? I know in some other cultures, some other religions, or let's say the philosophies, it's always used in the form of free will. But when it comes to Quran or Hadith, what is the reference for using free?
I don't know whether there is a reference to that. The term that's used in Islamic theology is juz'i ikhtiyari. So it is like, I guess in English speaking world, it's known as free will, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but like it's not only the matter of language, right? When we borrow the word, the phrase free will as it is from any other culture, it comes with all the connotations, all the loadings. And to me, I might be wrong, but it sounds like a innocent mistake we do. I mean, we can discuss it later, of course. But if we stick with what is the English word for, okay, it says power of choice, right, for juz'i ikhtiyari. So when we look at the Quranic language, or let's say the word choices from Islamic theology, the specific words are carefully chosen. So for instance, it's not even juz'i irade, or whatever. It's not irade, right? It's ikhtiyar. When it comes to creator, the word, what is the exact Arabic word for irade? It's from Turkish that I'm reciting, that I'm pronouncing. Is it? Yeah.
Which one?
For irade, is it in Arabic? What is the correct pronunciation?
It's irade.
Okay.
Irade yuridu, yeah.
Okay, then. So when it comes to the creator, the word irada is used, right? If I'm not mistaken. But when it comes to a human being, the word ikhtiyar is used. And I'm not sure if in any places in Quran, or even in Quranic, the tafsir of Quran, interpretations of Quran, for instance, in Risale, do we have any example use of free will or anything similar to that? Not in the English translation. It would be, again, the translator innocent mistake, if I'm right.
So I think even in Turkish, it's not that much of a common usage, or at least the author doesn't use it. For like a direct translation of free will is not there. So he keeps using the Arabic terminology, cüz-i ihtiyari.
That's what I'm guessing as well. Again, people should take this with a grain of salt, because I have not made a comprehensive research on that. But to me, using, if we don't have any other better translation, maybe power of choice, or how would you translate Jews?
Then let's define those terms and keep using those Arabic terms. How about that?
That would be even better. Like using ihtiyar or irade instead of power of choice or free will would be much better, because again, like a free will, to me at least, mean a lot. And again, to me, it doesn't perfectly overlap with the reality that as I experienced, as I know of, plus what I've been, taught by Quran.
Okay, so then when reading the text, let's try to use those terminology, whatever the translator used. And from the original text, I'm going to pull up the words and put the original Arabic word, or I would say the Islamic term being used in there. So for divine determining qadar and the power of choice, cüz-i ikhtiyari, are two important matters. We shall attempt to disclose a few of their mysteries in 4 topics. And cüz-i ikhtiyari, just the forming of the word, as Birkan mentioned, the second juz means like a partial, small or partial, a small piece, if you like. Cüz-i ikhtiyari. Ikhtiyari is the choice. And as Birkan was mentioning, so irada is different than ikhtiyar. And there's another word in Quran, sha'a, mashi'ah is the noun form, which is again being used in Quran for choice. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ is the verse that comes to my mind, for instance. So these are different options, but here cüz-i ikhtiyari is being mentioned when it comes to power of choice. And in the under the discussion of divine determining qadar, so it looks like what is attributed to human is called cüz-i ikhtiyari, a partial power of choice. And down the road, inshallah, if you have any comments on that, we can talk about that. First topic, divine determining and the power of choice, qadar and cüz-i ikhtiyari, are aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience, which show the final limits of Islam and belief. Islam and Iman. That is to say, so this first paragraph is going to be super loaded, and it's establishing the background. So let's be careful with those. So I'm going to be rereading several times, because many of the questions that we ask are, in a sense, irrelevant questions about qadar, because we are asking them in their wrong background. This is what the author is doing with this intro, as if saying that there's a framework under which questions would make sense. Otherwise, you can come up with innumerable questions about qadar and innumerable contradictions. Divine determining and the power of choice, qadar and cüz-i ikhtiyari, are aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience. State here is hal, conscience is wijdan. So It's aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience, which show the final limits of Islam and Iman. They are not theoretical and do not pertain to knowledge. So it's saying what it is and what it is not. It's a belief pertaining to state and conscience, and it's not a matter of theoretical, and it's not about knowledge. We can talk about that, what it means, but let me go through the paragraph once. That is to say, a believer attributes everything to Almighty God, even his actions and self, till finally the power of choice confronts him. Cüz-i ikhtiyari confronts him, so he cannot evade his obligation and responsibility. It tells him, you are responsible and under obligation. Then, so that he does not become proud at his good deeds and his achievements, on the other end, if you like, so that he does not become proud at his good deeds and his achievements, divine determining confronts him. This time, divine determining comes into the picture, saying, know your limits. The one who does them is not you. Yes, divine determining and the power of choice, qadar and cüz-i ikhtiyari, are at the final degrees of Iman and Islam, belief and Islam. The former has been included among the matters of belief to save the soul from pride, like qadar. So cüz-i ikhtiyari, let me see, yeah. Qadar is included among the matters of belief to save the soul from pride, and the latter, cüz-i ikhtiyari, is included among the matters of belief to make it admit to its responsibility. Obdurate, evil commanding souls clinging to divine determining in order to clear themselves of the responsibility of the evils they have committed, and they're becoming proud and conceited on account of virtues bestowed on them, and they are relying on the power of choice. These two are actions totally opposed to the mystery of divine determining and wisdom of the power of choice. They are not matters pertaining to knowledge, which might give rise to such actions. So this is an interesting intro. We'll come back to this paragraph again. I don't think we'll pass anywhere beyond that, but let me see. I'm going to read the next paragraph as well, then we'll come back to here. For ordinary people who have not progressed spiritually, there may be occasions when divine determining is used. And these are calamities and disasters, when it is the remedy for despair and grief. But it should not be used to justify a rebellion and in matters of future. But it should not be used to justify a rebellion and in the matters of future, so that it becomes a cause of dissipation and idleness. That is to say, divine determining has not been included among the matters of belief to relieve people from their obligations and responsibility, but to save them from pride and conceit. While the power of choice has been included in order to be the source of evils, not to be the source of virtues, so that people become like Pharaoh. The next paragraph is even more denser, so I would suggest stopping here. What do you think? Would you like me to continue reading, or let me see the hands? Some opinion from people, please. Would you like me to continue? If you continue, put a thumbs up. If not, put cross. Okay. And as says continue, I saw two crosses.
Maybe a few more paragraphs.
Say it again.
I'm thinking maybe a few more paragraphs.
Okay, so I saw, how about the other two people? More people are saying no. Okay, there's a third person who says no, so the no people won. Okay, and let's pause. Okay. So, divine determining and the power of choice are aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience, which show the final limits of Islam and Iman. And by the way, the word Islam in here is for, in the original text, it refers to the name of the religion, Islamiyat. Divine determining and the power of choice are aspects of a belief pertaining to state and conscience, which show the final limits of Islam and belief. They are not theoretical and do not pertain to knowledge. What do we understand from that? I mean, he keeps explaining it, but what is your take?
Well, I just, I'll speak up since I also said we shouldn't continue. Because I think there's a lot going on and I just wanted to pause for a moment. But yeah, this is, as you said, a very interesting introductory paragraph. And I'm thinking about how to think about, this idea that divine determining and Juzi ikhtiyar is not theoretical and does not pertain to knowledge. I'm wondering if that means that I should not expect to draw out this sort of perfect theoretical web or framework of or system of how it works or functions, but that I just have to recognize that I hold responsibility in choice. I mean, I don't know. Because on this topic, I mean, there's been, centuries and centuries of discussions and so many attempts to systematically sort of categorize or make perfect these logical arguments that point to one conclusion or another conclusion. And so I'm wondering if the author here is saying that, whether that's possible or not, like it's kind of futile to attempt that, but instead to recognize what it means for me right now, the sort of immediate significance that this might have for me, rather than approaching it as a sort of intellectual puzzle or game, as I think it is often approached. And I don't think, it's wrong to want to try to solve that intellectual puzzle, but at the same time, it seems like the way that this paragraph frames it, the primary, maybe not primary, but one of the purposes behind the existence of Juzi ikhtiyar and qadar is to put me under responsibility, put my nafs under responsibility, and also bring ease to me, this sort of fine balance between holding me responsible but still bringing me a sense of ease and security, that the existence of these two ideas, if you will, or aspects of belief are more relevant in so much as what they mean to my state of being right now than in terms of how they might pertain to, again, this sort of intellectual engagement I might want to just have with it for the sake of like puzzle solving. I'm not sure if that makes quite a lot of sense, but that's I don't know, some of the notions that I am extracting from here. Because this is the last thing I'll say before I continue. It just seems like the way he's framing it, the way Nursi's framing it here is very much in conversation with, it puts qadar and juz ihtiyar into conversation with my nafs, basically, and with my spirit, if you will, and what it does to me.
Yes, Jazakallah khair. So then we should ask the question, as you were saying, to that topic, am I approaching it like an intellectual puzzle? Or as the author kept some emphasizing in here, am I approaching this topic to be rightfully boasting about my successes? Or what is my motive for having this discussion or this conversation or even thinking about this matter? Which also takes me to ask the same question for other matters of belief as well. Like being a matter of belief versus being theoretical and knowledge. Like, does what he is saying, does it only apply? Aisha says in the notes, what is at stake for me? So when it comes to matters of belief, how is it different than matters of philosophy? Even when I talk about belief in God, we can also ask that question as an extension, or maybe we can even start from there if you like. And then what does it mean to be at the final limits of belief? Farah, please go ahead.
Yes, I was considering this question just by this statement, and it is a little challenging. But for example, I think when we discussed in the context of these writings, the belief in God and messengership, there is a theoretical element to it. Like it starts out by, like you don't need any framework other than you yourself and your experience. And that first conclusion that, okay, I exist and I must have been sort of created out of nothing, then who creates me? And, it gets to a conclusion. So there's a framework there that then one has to verify through their experience, feelings, so forth. And this sentence I do see as implying or suggesting that the topic of divine determining is operating within one. There's a prerequisite, which is that one has, I'm reading the sentence, final limits of Islam and belief, as that like someone has both theoretically and experientially in their feelings and in their experience sort of verified these truths for themselves, and only then can you come to apprehend, or should you begin to apprehend the concept of divine determining, which I think, as Aishanur was trying to point out, is not working within the same framework within which we prove the existence of God and to begin with. I think you can philosophize the existence of a creator. Now, what the attributes of this creator, or what is the nature of this creator, is the next step. But divine determining perhaps is something that needs to operate within the framework of there must be a God and he must send a messenger, and then I now figure out what divine determining is.
So, and there had been some notes as Farah was making comment. So Abdurrahman says, does Nursi think that any of the topics he discusses, which I think is other matters of belief, are theoretical? Is a question here. And by the way, the word in the original text that means theoretical is nazari. And the author is comparing two concepts in here, like being a belief pertaining to state versus being a theoretical or nazari topic. What is the distinction between the two? We can talk about that. Because Atik's comment, as Farah was saying, that you can philosophize about the existence of creator Atix was saying, I would assume that would be for the philosophers, like within, or I don't know, maybe this was an answer to Abdurrahman. So as if from a belief perspective, studying the same topic, although the same topic might be studied by philosophers as well, but studying the same topic from Quran's perspective must be something different, is what I'm understanding from the ongoing conversation. Brother Birkan.
Salam alaikum. Can you hear me well? I had to
Yes.
make some changes. Okay. So I would, like, if you don't mind, I like to change the order of these sentences to come up with, at least personally, in my opinion, a better, let's say, translation with the emphasis is put properly. So I would say something like, it won't be a complete sentence, I apologize, but I would say divine determining and power of choice, qadar and juz-i ikhtiyari, which show the final limits of Islam and belief. So I guess this is the first thing that we should be discussing. Divine determining and power of choice, qadar and juz-i ikhtiyari, show the final limits of Islam and belief. And the final limits of Islam and belief, what I understand is where you reach, again, where you reach in your journey of belief and in your experience or practicing Islam. This is where you reach. This is the final limit. Divine determining and power of choice. So just here, let's stop here. So this text then tell me that you start questioning the creation. You look at the creation, you conclude that there must be a creator, and then you continue your journey. You conclude that there must be a revelation. There must be a human prophet. This revelation must be taught to me in a human form. There must be, you know, the angels. There must be hereafter, and so on and so forth. You go, you take steps in your journey of Iman, and this is where you reach. At the end, you attribute everything to Almighty God. You know that whatever happened in your life, whatever you experience, it is nothing but a speech of God addressed to you. And everything in your life, including yourself, is just a speech of God. It's a part of your training, education, and so on. You do that, and you come to a point in which you need to study now, as you studied the belief in God, belief in prophets, belief in angels, belief in revelation, hereafter. Now you need to study belief in divine determining, qadar, and belief in power of choice, juz-i ikhtiyar. This is what you should be studying once you, have some, at least at some level. It doesn't have to be perfect. Of course, the journeys are not linear. So it's not like, okay, I have to be expert in other topics, then I will study this. No, but when studying this, do not forget or rely on all other aspects of belief, Iman. So this is what I understand, which shows the final limit of Islam and belief. Once we, establish this, it continues. Divine determining and power of choice.
And if I may interrupt.
Go ahead, please. Yes.
So that is the part that starts with that is to say, I think is also explaining what it means to be on the
final limit of, yeah.
Yeah, final limit. Because as if the final limit of Iman and Islam looks to be perfectly saying that attributing everything to Almighty God, because initially I thought everything was by nature and I am also the owner of myself and controlling myself. So a believer attributes everything to Almighty God, even his actions and self, till finally the power of choice confronts him. So it looks like this is the journey. And in practice, for example, belief, when we say belief in prophet, so belief in prophet means, if you look at it, what it means I cannot find truth by myself. I need guidance. So this is why I think that journey, attributing everything to Almighty God, includes like belief in prophethood is under that, or belief in books is under that. I cannot find truth by myself. So Creator must guide me, so on and so forth. This is why I think all matters of belief, in a sense, are practicing pure tawheed in this regard. I interrupted you, Birkan. Sorry about that. Atik raised his hand. How shall we go, Birkan?
Oh, if you don't mind, I can continue.
Okay, go ahead.
But okay. So, and I don't mind interruption. So please, if you need to do more interruptions, go ahead. So, okay, the first part was, again, the divine determining and power of choice, qadar and juzi ihtiyari, show the final limits of Islam and belief, and we discuss what this, that means. And then the sentence continues, are, these two things, are types of Iman, I would say types of Iman, not aspects of a belief, types of belief. There are different types of belief. Types of belief which or that relate to state and conscience. And what that means is there are different types of belief. There is, as it says, they are not theoretical and do not pertain to knowledge. There are types of belief that pertain to knowledge. So you come to the conclusion, you come to this belief, right, by following certain knowledge that is given to you, or some chain of arguments which which use some knowledge, relies on knowledge, and you come to some conclusion. There are certain things in our journey of Iman, journey of belief, that we come to conclusion by following some knowledge that is given to us. Through some arguments. So, for instance, the belief in hereafter. There are type of Iman in it, the type of belief that we need to use there, which is also relates to conscience and state, but also there are some other types which uses this knowledge that we have about the creation. Same way, maybe belief in angels or belief in God. They are the types of Iman which pertain to some knowledge that we gather from the universe. The other type of Iman, which is listed here, the theoretical type of belief, which relies on some theoretical understanding. You study creation, you again come up with some theoretical models, frameworks, or arguments, and through this theoretical analysis, you come to a conclusion and you say that, okay, this is my belief. And there are many things that we discussed so far which relates to belief. There are theoretical and pertain to knowledge. Belief in prophets, there are some parts pertain to knowledge. There are some parts pertain to some theoretical understanding, analysis, some necessities, right? In the creation and in our the way our minds work, there are things that are necessary. It has to be this way or that way, which pertains or which relate to, theoretical iman. But here, author says we study a different type of belief here, which pertains to state and conscious. What does it mean? What I understand from here, it says your belief will rely on your conscience. Your belief will rely on not a knowledge, not a necessity or theoretical analysis. There's nothing wrong with them. We use them all the time. But this time, our belief will rely on our state, what I am, how I, what I have access in the first hand. So let me give you an example, at least, again, to the extent I understand. So for instance, I know that I'm speaking right now, right? I have belief that I'm speaking. So there is one part of it which may be based on knowledge that I, hear the sound coming out my mouth, again, with my ears. There are some also probably theoretical aspects of it, but there is one part which I know through my state, like in first hand, I know it. I have a first-hand access to it. I know I have, my belief is certain that I'm speaking. The same way, like when I'm hungry, my belief in my hunger, it's not theoretical, it's not relate to knowledge, but it relates to my state. I see a child being tortured, may Allah prevent, and I know it is bad through my conscience. So my belief in that, the badness of this event, relies on my conscience. I know it through my conscience. So what I understand from this state and conscience is that the author is saying that your access to belief, your access, your path to belief, your access to your conclusions should use your state, what state you are in, what you are right now, and your conscience. Use them, and through them come to a conclusion. Up to this point, we mostly used our, the set of this nexus of knowledge we have. We use some theoretical analysis, but now author says, again, make some analysis, again, come to some conclusions, but this time, put the emphasis on your state and conscience. These two will be your source of, let's say, your access to truth.
So can we say, like, thinking and thinking and thinking about causality and everything, making observations outside, I say that, well, nothing belongs to themselves, and therefore I shouldn't be belonging to myself. I am very sure intellectually, and I'm using the word intellectually in here in the sense of, in theory, I am so sure that I don't own myself. But you said, oh, Yusuf, this was a brilliant derivation. You are so smart. How come you came up with this idea? And I start becoming happy. Like my conclusion, intellectual conclusion was not my state. It didn't become a state for me. And I start smiling. You can see that it didn't become a state because I started smiling. I was happy that you are praising me. You attributing that smartness to me made me happy, which is a contradiction to my initial theoretical conclusion. So I am not at a level of state, or it was not a conclusion with my conscience yet. It was just some intellectual conclusion so far. So at that level, as if the author is saying that maybe to the extent that those theoretical conclusions of yours becomes a state for you, or your conscience confirms those, and when somebody praises you, rather than smiling, you start frowning, not by forcing yourself, but if you like, as a second nature, you say astaghfirullah, but seriously, not just so that, oh yeah, astaghfirullah sort of a thing, but no, you get, how come you are blaming me with being a, stealing these, attributing things that do not belong to me. I didn't steal them, they belong to my creator. Am I getting angry like that, for instance? Getting angry in this sense, I feel like means my conscience is now also confirming that I am not the owner of anything. So I feel like to the extent that my conscience confirms all these, then the topic of qadar and juz-i ikhtiyari becomes meaningful to talk about. Otherwise, what the author says in here about theoretical and pertaining to knowledge, I can give you a lecture about everything belonging to the creator and a continuous creation and everything. But then if I start talking about qadar, probably, again, I'm going to analyze the topic intellectually, and we'll make analysis, and the author says nothing will prevent you from going to the other end, as the end of this paragraph says. Like, you can equally likely go to the other extreme and say that no, free will, good things are attributed to me. And for qadar, you can derive the exact opposite and say, yeah, even the bad things, they were written. They are with God's will, not mine. Nothing will stop you from doing that, is my impression.
So there's one thing, Yusuf, I'd like to maybe clarify and warn. So I don't think, here at least, the emphasis is that, you come to a position using your intellect, now it should be your state. So this is true. I'm not, objecting that, what you said. This is true. But I guess here the emphasis is the two different paths, as we can say. The two different paths to come to conclusion, to believe something. One path is, as you call it, the intellectual journey. The other path is a journey based on your state and conscience. So in order to use this second path, you don't need to, at least not always, you don't necessarily first start with intellectual journey and then make it your state. I guess here it's an independent path, as it is described. The author is saying that using your state and conscience, using your hal, for instance, you are hungry. For instance, you know from the first hand, in the first hand, how would you say that? From the first hand, at first hand? What is the right proposition there? Sorry.
First-hand experience, let's call it.
Okay. You know it from first-hand experience. By first-hand experience, that you are hungry, that you are needy. You can also come to conclusion that you are needy through an intellectual the journey. You can study the human state in a philosophical sense, start from his creation, or start from her birth and go on. But also you know the same thing in a maybe a shorter path, through a shorter path, by looking at your state, by consulting your conscience. And the second path that we can use, I guess author is telling us that now in this topic, we will be chiefly using the second path. We will ask our state and conscience what they think. We will rely on them and come to some conclusions. So I guess here there's the distinction between theoretical pertaining knowledge and conscience. It's not in the sense that, these are two steps in a linear journey. First, you come to a conclusion using intellectual reasoning, and then make them your state and agree with your conscience. I guess here it's more like there's a distinction between the two as two different paths, which of course you can use in parallel. You can start from one and then continue with the other and so on. But these are two different paths. And now we will using the second path, author is saying. If you want to know what qadar is, what divine determining is, first and foremost, look at your conscience, author says. And maybe another warning here for others, that what we read here doesn't say that you won't use your reasoning. No, you will use your reasoning, but what your reasoning will rely on, what the data is coming from, is your conscience and your state. And using data from these sources, you will reason. You will come to some conclusions. This is what I understand here.
Jazakallah khair. So this is an important note and warning, so I appreciate that. You're right. So it sounds like intellectually first studying something and then living by that sounds like a linear thing. So it shouldn't be understood as that they can go independently. If we take theoretical study as thoroughly going through some intellectual arguments and whatnot to prove existence of God. But in general, what I can understand from that is, that stealing is bad, let's say, but still you are stealing from, I don't know, your creator's attributes or something like that knowing part. So I think the part that needs to be distinguished in here, as the author is comparing state versus knowledge, you can know, I think you can say that this is right or this is wrong, but living by it is a different level. It's a different thing. So this is what you were saying. I think there's a tiny difference between the two, like feeling hunger.
So I guess, yeah, so when you say stealing is bad, right? So I'm making the distinction, I'm putting the distinction just right there. And I say that you may know, like you may come to the conclusion that stealing is bad through ilmi and nazari, or theoretical, I don't know, pertaining to knowledge or something that you see, that you experience, I don't know, maybe. through a theoretical analysis. You come to knowing stealing is bad through a theoretical analysis. You may also come to know stealing is bad through your conscience. So this is the distinction I'm making. Not after what happens, the stealing is bad. This is another topic to me. Here, we are talking about how you come to conclusion that stealing is bad. An author is making this distinction to me. Author is saying that you may come to knowing that the stealing is bad through your conscience or through some theoretical analysis. And here we will come to know it by conscience. What happens after you come to this conclusion, whether you continue stealing or not, this is something else, at least to me.
Jazakallah khair. Yes, Suhail, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I joined a bit late, so I apologize if people have already made these comments. But what I took away from this paragraph is that, yeah, I don't know if this was already touched upon earlier, but divine determining being the final limits of Islam and belief. And the way I understood this is that it's a final limit of Islam and belief, because if you think about every other aspect of belief, the necessity of a creator, of angels, of books, of prophets, of resurrection, those are things that are external to the self in one sense, in the sense that they are distinct entities. I don't want to say tangible, because you can't say tangible per se, but what you can say is that they are entities unto themselves. That's why divine determining is the final limit, because it's not something distinct. Like, you can't point to divine determining. You can point to the creator's absolute knowledge or power or will, but that's still pointing to the creator and his names. You can point to the creation, but in a sense, you're still pointing to the angelic aspect. You can point to yourself, but you can't, it's not an independent entity unto itself. And that's why I think he calls it the final limit of Islam and belief, because it's you can't theorize about divine determining per se. You can't point to something and say that's divine determining, or this is, because it doesn't, there is no sort of independent entity you can conceive of. Because when you talk about divine determining, you're already talking about the creator and his names. You're already talking about the creation inherently. And the other aspect of why it, to me, doesn't pertain to knowledge is that divine determining, unlike the other entities in a sense, it concerns the self, because not only are you dealing with the creator, you're dealing with yourself and your choice, your human choice, your will. To the point that, the man is, as he says, is confronted with that and his obligation and responsibility. And I think that's what makes it experiential and personal, because if I try to make it a theoretical entity, like another entity, then I could negate my will and attribute my actions, evil or good, potentially, to him, because I'm attributing it to an external entity that I've theorized about, the creator and his will and his power, rather than saying that, oh, I'm responsible for my actions, good or bad or evil, and I have to admit responsibility to what I have done. That's not theoretical. That's in a sense real, because it's myself. You don't theorize about yourself. You already know yourself. You know you have a choice. People can question, oh, I don't have a free choice. You can question whatever you want, but that's not really something you can theorize about per se, in the sense of, oh, it's like a self-examination. There's no external examination out there. And you already know yourself, so there's nothing to theorize about. You can choose things. You already know that inherently. It's not a theory. It's your own self-accepted fact. Just the fact of knowing yourself and your ability to do that is a sign of your one's will. That's why you can theorize about it, but then when you theorize about it, it's almost as if you're talking about yourself independently, and then you can get to the point where you can say, well, I am not even my will, and so I attribute my will to him, and so even if I do something evil, that's his problem, not mine. Rather than looking at a person and saying, no, this is who I am, that's my will. It's not some theory. It's not some theory, it's a real thing, and I experience it, it's who I am, and I have to take responsibility for it. To me, that's what makes it different than every other, because the creator, angels, books, prophets, resurrection are not intrinsic to the self per se, in the same sense will is. They are distinct entities that you can theorize about, but you can't theorize about will because it's real, it's personal. It's not theoretical, it's who you are. So that's what I took away from, and that to me is why it's the final limit of Islamic belief, because it's the point at which what you believe in reaches you. It's like the point where you and belief meet. Right there is divine determining. How you choose and how the creator chooses is where everything meets. It's at that point. So that's what I took away from this.
Jazakallah khairan. Atik, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a little question about the next sentence where Norsi is given an example of, like, testing the limits of Islam and belief, where we start off with a believer at the final limit of belief, and his belief leads him to reach or be confronted with the power of choice. And Islam, I would say those are grouped together. But for me, it's like I would say I would start off with choice, being aware of my own conscious choice, and maybe having that lead to belief. Like, belief for me would be much harder to attain or witness. So I was curious as to why Norsi phrased it in the order that he did. He gave his example.
So the question, as I understand, is the journey here, as the author says, is as if from outside to inside. A believer attributes everything to Almighty God, as if, yeah, sun belongs to him, moon belongs to him, stars belongs to him. Then layer by layer comes to the inner world, as if. And Atik, you're asking, why is this the order? Shouldn't it be the other way around?
Well, yeah, for me, it works probably the other way around.
Good. Interesting. I mean, for me, it works the way, or it worked and still is working the way he is describing in here, but it's an interesting question. Shall it start from inside out or outside in? Which one would be easier to attribute to the creator? Which one is harder? Because I feel like easier versus harder is going on in here. Like, if like the things that are not that much dear to me, or more clearly belonging to the creator, I can give them. But once I start having a different type of, I would say, emotional relationship with things, it is being harder to, in a sense, attribute them to the creator. Like, I can say, yeah, my car belongs to my creator, but when it comes to my daughter, things are not being that much easy. Like, you can sacrifice your money to the whatever, but how about your life, yourself, for instance? I don't know whether this is the line of thought. Yeah, Atik.
No, I have not much to say. But yeah.
So Yeah. So I don't know if this inside out or outside in, because this also relates to Birkan's initial comment as well, I believe. Like consciously knowing something from inside versus knowledge-wise, like an external entity you are knowing about something. Maybe it can apply to here as well. So the question of that order, what's going on here? Yes, Suhail.
To Hatik's question, you know, I actually agree with Mercy in the sense that I don't really think, and I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I have a feeling most people don't think about their, like when you think about human will, if you step back, you realize that and this is why you can't, I mean, I guess this is in some way theoretical if you step back from yourself, which is impossible. You can't remove yourself from yourself and think about will independently. But the human being is their will. So it's difficult, I should say, it's impossible, I should say, really, to think about your will independent of yourself, because that's who you are. You are not you and then your will. Like, it's not you here and then your will somewhere else. That's who you are. You are your knowledge, you are your power, you are your will, you are whatever qualities you are as a human being. It's not something you can think independently of yourself. Whereas you can look at the stars and the moon and the sun and think about them external to the self and say, oh, that must belong to him, that must belong to him, that must belong to him, and point to something external to yourself. Because you don't point to yourself. Like, how do you point to yourself when you are yourself? It's in a sense impossible. Only after you look at all things external to yourself, then do you come to yourself and say, who am I? I'm my will. Does my will belong to him now? But it's not really something you initially thought about, because nobody really thinks about themselves as their will, because it's just automatic. It's just who you are as a human being. And then if it does come to that point where you think about your choice, your ability to choose, oh, just like the sun, the moon, it also belongs to him. Therefore, all the actions belong to him. Therefore, my ability to choose belongs to him. And if I choose an evil deed, that also belongs to him. That's his fault. Just like the sun, moon, and the stars. That's why you can't think about will, in my opinion, theoretically, like you do about the sun and the moon, because those things are external, whereas your will is not. It's who you are. And the question is, how does who I am relate to the creator and his choice and his determining? Because I mean, I don't know really how else to explain it, but if you think about theoretically in the sense of, okay, just like the sun and the moon, my will belongs to him. It's almost as if you're detaching yourself from yourself and talking about yourself and saying, oh, I'm just like the sun and my will is just like the sun. So they all belong to him, and any result or consequence of those things also belongs to him. And I am not my will. No, but you are your will. That's who you are. So how can you say those things belong to him and he's responsible, but then deny yourself? It's like denying yourself who you are. And I think that's why it's the most difficult thing to reconcile with, because it's unlike everything else in the universe.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, so that is to say, a believer attributes everything to Almighty God, even his actions and self, till finally the power of choice confronts him. So he cannot evade his obligation and responsibility. It tells him you are responsible and under obligation. Then, so that he does not become proud at his good deeds, because if the journey continues like this, if I'm responsible, then I can also be proud at his good deeds and his achievements. Divine determining confronts him, saying, know your limits. The one who does them is not you. So these are the two examples that are explaining what it means it to be at the final limits of Islam. And we also talked about from various angles by now, I guess, about state and conscience and not being theoretical and pertaining to knowledge. And the two major understandings that I heard so far, as far as I understand, is Birkan was mentioning this state and conscience becoming the source of my iman versus knowledge being the source of my iman. So, and he was giving the example of being hungry. And in Suhail's explanation, the way I understood it is, who is the object here that I am talking about? If the object is outside, like sun and moon and whatnot, and I can define it in a sense from a certain perspective, then I would call it knowledge. But the object now here I am talking about is me. And as I was trying to understand his point of view, so how am I going to define myself while I am within myself? As if I need to first go outside of myself and look at myself and then try to, if you like, encapsulate it, because every definition is an encapsulation. Then it would become a knowledge. But when we talk about the power of choice, we can sense it, we can feel it, we can be conscious of it, but can we define it so that it's going to become a knowledge, is what I am hearing from Suhail, if I am right, and if I'm not wrong. So let's put it this way. So please correct me if anything is wrong. Okay, Suhail says, good. Okay, so any comments up to here? Okay, Birkan and Suhail both said good. Okay. So now that we had a summary of what was said so far, and so being then not taking it as at a state, if I'm not approaching the topic from point of view of a state, the author is warning me against that, as if saying that you shouldn't be even talking about the topic. It's not an issue for you. The matter is not an issue for you, or this topic was not included as part of Iman and Islam for your intellectual exercise. It is in there for you to approach it from this state point of view, hal point of view, conscience point of view, not for intellectual arithmetic or exercise point of view. So, and putting this to the very beginning, I feel like if Nazmul asks a question, let's say within the next 10 minutes, I feel like the author is saying that first put it into scale, Nazmul, yourself, or anyone who is going to answer Nazmul. Is this question from coming or taking into account that the topic is not a theoretical and knowledge topic, but a state and conscience topic? If not, you don't need to go any further. If it's not fitting that criteria, simply the matter was not, the matter of qadar and juz ikhtiyari was not devised for the purpose of the questioner, which I think is a more maybe day-to-day example that comes to my mind with that is, as if you Google any atheist website, they would say, can God create a stone larger than, or like as large as he cannot lift it up? So like the question doesn't make sense. Question is problematic. This is the definition of God versus the understanding of God versus a stone that is not being able to be lifted. It doesn't make any sense to mention the two at the same sentence. Likewise in here, as if the author is saying that talking about qadar and juz ikhtiyari should not be considered outside of being a state and conscience. If the person who is discussing about the matter is not at that position, at that state, what is that state? Attributing everything to Almighty God, even his actions and self. So being at that sort of a state, or admitting that state, then that person can talk about the matter. Or actually the matter is becoming meaningful in this sort of a background. But on the other hand, okay, now I keep reading the rest of the paragraph. Yes, divine determining and the power of choice, qadar and juz ikhtiyari, are at the final degrees of belief in Islam. Final degrees of belief in Islam. Let me check if the original. Yeah, final degrees of belief in Islam. The former has been included among the matters of belief to save the soul from pride, and the latter to make it admit to its responsibility. This is also interesting. Like as if now explaining, like this sentence is interesting, saying that the Creator is suggesting you this matter of belief for, again, some instructional purposes in your life. It is included among the matters of belief to save you from pride, and also to make it admit to its responsibility. So that much comes to my mind, but this sentence was a little bit interesting. If anybody wants to make any comment, I keep reading. On the other hand, obdurate, evil commanding souls clinging to divine determining in order to clear themselves of the responsibility of the evils they have committed, and they are becoming proud and conceited on account of the virtues bestowed on them, and they are relying on the power of choice, are actions totally opposed to the mystery of divine determining and wisdom of the power of choice. They are not matters pertaining to knowledge which might give rise to such actions. Yes, Suhail.
You know, one thing I thought about just while you're reading that is that, you know, as I'm sure, I think he goes, having read this before, I think he goes into talking about the Jabari and the Mu'tazila, but the idea that if I attribute, it's, as he said, it's a self-contradiction when you think about it. If I say that, okay, I have my will, it belongs to him, and therefore the actions that result out of that will belong to him, then where's my will? It's a contradiction if you think about it, because what you're saying then is that you have no will, as if it's all fatalistic. There is no will to speak of. It's a self-contradiction. If you're saying things are determined and you have no choice in the matter, then there is no will to even speak about. So the idea of divine determining doesn't even exist in that context. In the sense of, sorry, not divine, the idea that you as a human being have will doesn't even exist. And that's a self-contradiction, because the very fact that you even concluded that, or can attribute everything else external to yourself to him, is your choice. Then you come to yourself and say, I also attribute it, and therefore I have no will. It's all determined for me. And what I mean by determined is as if I have no choice. That's why it's the limit, because now the human will, as you said, you can't measure it outside of yourself. That's who you are. What is it? You have to defining what is will? What is the utility or role of will? And how does my will relate to his will? You can't theorize about that. It's you experience it and you see it firsthand. You see that you do something and you bear the consequence of that action. That's a firsthand experience. That's not theoretical. It's just it's who you are. That's your everyday existence, your life. It's nothing to theorize because it's not something that you can't experience. Like I can't experience the creator per se in reality, his essence. I can't experience the angels in reality. I don't know what divine speech is like in reality. I don't even know what prophecy is like or what it is to receive divine revelation or what in reality, not resurrection doesn't happen now, but resurrection, the resurrection, I don't know what that is because it hasn't happened for me as of right now. But my will, if you think about it, it is the one living thing that I have that I directly experience because it's me. And to deny it by saying, oh, my actions don't belong to me is a denial of the self. That's why it's a contradiction.
Jazakallah khair. Right. So I think we came to the end of the first paragraph, and the author made an intro about what the topic is and what the topic is not, or what is the context that the topic is worthy to be discussed and what is not the context that the topic should be taken in. And I believe this background should set a good framework for our discussions moving on. And I believe we are going to refer back to this initial paragraph as we will keep asking questions. And we'll say that, well, am I asking that question still thinking that the topic is theoretical and pertaining to knowledge, or am I talking about it from a state and conscience perspective, rather Burkan?
So the part that we read last, which says divine determining and the power of choice, qadar and juzi ikhtiyari, are at the final degrees of belief and Islam. The former, which is divine determining, can we say fate for divine determining as well? But fate is also used a synonym as belief, I guess. Anyway, the divine determining, that everything is being determined by the creator, it says has been included among the matters of belief to save the soul from pride. But I would say, I think, okay, fate versus fate. Okay, I was referring to the first one. The former has been included among the matters of belief. Rather, I would say the former is there to save the soul from pride. This is its utility, if you can say. Hence, because it's so important, it is considered as part of the matters of belief. And the second one is there to make you admit that you have responsibility. So the way I read this part is that, okay, the author is saying that we will study divine determining. What it means that everything is determined by the creator. We will study the power of choice, that we have, at least apparently, we do seem to have a power of choice, although everything is being created by the creator. despite this fact, we still seem to have a power of choice. First, author says, okay, author said in the first sentence, the first a few sentences, that, okay, let's clarify things. First of all, when we study this topic, try to ask questions to your conscience and try to get answers from there, okay, under the light of revelation. Your conscience and state will be your main source. The second, now he's clarifying something else. What is the purpose of, such an notion, like a divine determining? We have the access to such a notion in our life through my conscience, for instance. I know there is divine determining. Through my conscience, I know that I have power of choice. So what is the point of it? Like, why these two understanding, these two elements of conscience were placed there by God? So I guess this should be the way of thinking. We should ask questions like, what is the purpose of this in my journey of Iman, in my journey of belief? How understanding these two, how making these two clearer will help me? What is the point? Why God, from my point of view, of course? What is the wisdom to me that God created these two elements in my conscience? Why I have this sense, this state of power of choice and divine determining? An author says, this is the purpose. Divine determining, you have access to divine determining. You know by your conscience, through your conscience, that divine determining is there because it helps you save your soul from pride. When something happens, especially when something good happens or bad, doesn't matter, you know that it is measured. It comes through a measure. It is there because it fulfills a purpose. It is created by your Lord. The same way, the second one helps you save your soul from thinking that you don't have any responsibility in anything. This sense of power of choice, this apparent notion of power of choice is there to save your soul from, falling in the misunderstanding that you don't have any responsibility. First, the author clarified how we're going to study them, what would be our main source of discussion. And now he's saying, by the way, they are there for a purpose. They are placed there for a purpose. I mean, we could read this part as, the scholars put them among the matter of belief because they are important in that sense or this sense. But I think author is saying that they are really important. They have really important purposes. These are the two purposes that God created them for you. They serve you for this, they serve these purposes for you. And for that reason, they are included in the matters of belief. So now we clarified the purpose of them as well. So studying them would be easier. This is how I see it. Maybe as a side note as well, just a very short one, it is really interesting. The author says the power of choice, this apparent sense of power of choice is created in you to save your soul. What is it? Not thinking that you don't have responsibility and divine determining is created not to give you pride, but even among the Muslim people or among the believers, they are used just in an opposite way. We use our power of choice to glorify ourselves. We say, we Muslim people, or we believers, we Christians, we Jews, doesn't matter. We created all these beautiful things on the earth. We created technology, we created a civilization through the power of choice given to us by God. So it is used to have pride, of course, by covering it. We don't say, I created it through just my power. We say that God gave me something and I created it. But it is used even among believers as a source of pride. An author says, no, it's just the opposite. It is there to take the responsibility of the bad things.
Jazakallah khair. Just a very, very, very quick, another example that I was listening to. I was listening to another recording yesterday, which applies to Quran. I think the author in here is making a warning because it's very commonly being done as such. The example that I'm going to talk about is the stories in Quran. So in our discussions, as we were studying Quran for quite some time in 25th word, for instance, we also started with a description of what Quran is, which comes with what Quran is not. So when Quran talks about stories of prophets, we need to emphasize, even before starting the conversation, that the purpose of this is guidance for me here and now. This is not encyclopedia. This is not history book. So, and you can take them as history, as if my creator is telling me some historical information, so that whatever I'm going to do with that historical information. But if I change it as, no, this is guidance, pure guidance from, it's not like from 14 centuries ago, but it's a speech from eternity, then it changes everything. So like that, I think in here, we are also defining a frame in which the topic of qadar makes sense. And actually, it is devised for that purpose. Like anything else in this life, if we think about there are many things that we take for granted. But if you think about being created as a human, being created in a family relationship, actually everything is being framed in a certain way so that I'm going to get to know my creator. The creation is framed in a way that I'm going to get to know my creator. But there's also another alternative framework in which it says, well, there is no meaning in the life. Everything exists by itself, for instance. This is another framework. If you would like to take it from that perspective, yet the world becomes meaningless. And there's even no point of talking about God or talking about religion in such a framework, because everything is upside down. So it doesn't make any sense to talk about anything in this regard. So this is why I think this introduction part is so important, to define under which framework discussing about qadar makes sense and what is its utility. Jazakallah khair. So we have been over time. Inshallah, next week we can continue from the next paragraph, but please take a look at the text. It looks like it's going to be very dense. So we are going to continue from page 478 in the online version. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم من الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.